Hi, my name is Alana, and all the clothes that you see me wearing now are bulletproof. The reason for this is that every day my life is under threat, and I have to do everything possible to save myself. My dad is a former official who is now retired. All his colleagues have known him as an honest and impartial person. I can say with confidence that this is true, and that's why I'm really proud of my dad. In fact, these are not empty words because we live in a very corrupt place, and it is common here to take bribes and associate with criminal gangs. But my dad turned out to be firm and principled, like Flint, and this caused a whole bunch of trouble. It all started 5 years ago when the criminals claimed some land that was a part of our city. However, the administration of the district was going to build an orphanage there. Moreover, the layout had already been developed and the first works had begun. My dad was responsible for making the final decision, and he was adamant. He was offered bribes, he was blackmailed and threatened, but everything was in vain. He was not deterred by the gangs and managed to secure that land for the orphanage. His decision caused a storm of anger and indignation among the criminals, and their leader promised to take revenge. The following year, 2 attempts were made on my dad's life, but fortunately, nothing bad happened. However, bodyguards were hired for our entire family. Then again, everything was quiet, and I was looking forward to the moment when I would be able to live as before and not be followed by security guards everywhere I went. However, not a trace of these thoughts remained in my mind when one day an attempt was made on the lives of my father, mother, and me. We were lucky again because there were bodyguards nearby, but then I realized that things were serious. Soon, Dad received a message from the head of the mafia. It was stated there that Dad and Mom were no longer their goals because they were hunting for me. He explained this by the fact that since Dad decided to be kind and give that land to the poor children, he must lose his own child. Their logic was implacable, of course, but these words terribly scared us. On the same day, we had a meeting with the head of our family security, the head of the FBI, and the chief of the police. As a result, it was decided to tighten security measures as much as possible, and the main point in their innovations was the use of body armor for each family member, without which it was no longer possible to leave the house. What can I say? At first, this caused just awful feelings. The armor turned out to be terribly uncomfortable and heavy. While wearing it, I felt like a life-size puppet looking like a hot dog. I swear, it was more difficult even to breathe, not to mention my appearance. In fact, in that moment, I looked as if I had gained 10 pounds, and I was really clumsy. Everything was even harder for my parents, as they both had health problems such as high blood pressure and tachycardia. On the second day after wearing the body armor, my dad needed the help of doctors, and it became clear to us that we had to look for another way out. And the solution was found, but it was really costly. Instead of body armor, we were offered to buy bulletproof clothing. In any other situation, we would have considered it complete nonsense to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on clothes. But when your family's lives are at stake, everything is perceived differently. Bulletproof clothes. To be honest, I didn't even know that existed. But it turned out that many high-ranking officials have been using such outfits all of their lives. So I had to get used to my new image. These clothes turned out to be a little more comfortable and lighter than body armor, but still, comfort was out of the question. Apart from that, the way that these clothes looked left much to be desired. Everything was of some gloomy color and had a strange style. This was not me. I don't know why, but deep inside I was hoping that soon the criminals would be detained and everything would be over. I would be able to throw all my new and boring clothes into the trash and return to my favorite outfits. I wish this happened as soon as possible, but I was brought back to Earth after another attempt on my life. On that day, my bodyguards and I were in the courtyard of our house where I was doing stretching exercises. It was sunny outside, and I only wished that I didn't have the guards or these terrible clothes. And then the world would become better and more attractive. As soon as these thoughts popped into my mind, something started buzzing above us. It sounded like a big fly. I looked up and saw a drone above us. After that, one of the bodyguards jumped at me and knocked me down. And the next second, there were heard shots. I felt like something was piercing into my clothes and cap, but I could not understand what it was. It was as if someone was throwing little bouncy balls at me. I could feel this and it hurt a little, but not too much. Then the bodyguards picked me up and brought me inside inside the house, locking all the windows and starting to call someone. And only after that I realized that I was about to be killed with the help of a drone, but my clothes stopped all the bullets, and that's why I had survived. At that moment, I was scared by my own thoughts. What if this was a reminder that I needed to be grateful for what I had? It's hard to say exactly, but after that incident, I started thinking more positively. It also became clear that waiting until all the craziness would be over was really stupid because those people were serious and they were unlikely to retreat in the near future. It was also foolish to expect that they would be detained. If it had been that easy, they would have already been behind bars. This is why I needed to get used to that way of life. Soon, special agents contacted our family and said that the only way to stop the hunt for me was to provoke the criminals. According to their plan, I had to refuse the service of the bodyguards and start leading a normal life. In short, I needed to expose myself and become a target. The special agents said that they would continuously monitor me, and during the assassination attempt, they would try to find the criminal and detain him along with all of his accomplices. Of course, at first, we didn't even want to hear anything like this, but the agents reminded me that all my clothes were bulletproof, and that meant that there was nothing to be afraid of. I just had to adhere to a certain measure, wearing a baseball cap with a large visor as well as bulletproof clothing with long pants and sleeves, and to never raise my head when leaving the house since my face was the most vulnerable place. I didn't even want to imagine how scary it was for my parents to accept my decision to do what the special agents said, but there was just no other way out. That cat and mouse game could last forever, and the constant tension was incredibly exhausting and annoying. In short, we agreed. The next week was really tense because I had to walk a lot all alone and wait for the fatal shot. I shuddered after hearing any rustle, and I guess I started going crazy. But then another attempt took place. I was sitting on a bench in the center of the city drinking coffee from a paper cup, which suddenly burst in my hands, and I felt intense burning pain. The next moment, 2 bullets flew to my cap, and I immediately noticed them and was gripped by panic. But I remembered the words of the special agents who told me many times after hearing the shots, I was supposed to fall face down and wait for someone to come over to me. I did that automatically as if I had lived through this instance 100 times. At that moment, the time became infinite because I did not see and did not know what was going on around me and how soon I would be picked up. I was also afraid that the criminals would be quicker than the special agents and would get to me first. I guess at some point, due to anxiety and worrying, I fell asleep or fainted because I woke up after being scared when my mom called me. My parents, together with special agents and doctors, picked me up, put me in an ambulance, and took me to the hospital because I had burns from the hot coffee on my hands. Later, I found out that everything was over. The person who had been shooting and was detained within 10 minutes after the attempt on my life, together with his gang and leader. So at that moment, nothing threatened me. After that incident, I started to appreciate as well as love life and beautiful, comfortable clothes even more. Hi everyone, my name is Lorraine and I have a very unusual phobia. I'm afraid of the ticking clock. Some people may find this fear funny, but in fact it turns my life into a real nightmare. You may wonder how I got this phobia. It was triggered by a serious psychic trauma from which I was never able to recover. When I was a kid, my mother and I went to the bank to cash a check. I was in a good mood because my mom promised to buy me a toy. We almost made it through the line when robbers broke into the bank. I've never been so scared in my whole life. The armed men forced everyone to lie down on the floor and not to move. The criminals wanted their conditions to be fulfilled properly, so they set a large bomb in the middle of the hall. It was a box with a bundle of wires and a large clock that counted down the time to the explosion. I saw a bunch of bombs in cartoons and understood what would happen when the time was up. There was a deadly silence in the hall, and only the loud ticking was heard. I don't know how much time we spent lying on the floor and listening to that ticking, but it seemed to last forever. The noise of the clock seemed to be real thunder, and that terrified me. Then the police suddenly got inside the bank and seized the robbers. They defused the bomb, but the clockwork didn't stop ticking in my head right away. I had panic attacks every day, and even a long-term course of psychological recovery didn't help me cope with it. No one, even I couldn't guess what triggered those panic attacks. But one day, my parents noticed that I had impulsively broken the clock in my room and in the living room. They talked to me again and found out that I had a subconscious fear of ticking. We got rid of all the mechanical clocks in the house. Even my dad didn't put on his favorite wristwatch at home in order not to hurt me once again. At school, I had asked a bully classmate to secretly break the big clock at the entrance. He gladly did me a favor, and fortunately for me, they were soon replaced by new electronic clock faces. My parents saw how bad I felt, so they decided that our whole family should move to another city in order to protect me from the terrible memories. It even helped me because I managed to live without panic attacks for a year, and I finally became an ordinary person. I began to walk more, communicate a lot with my peers, and even made new friends. I didn't tell my new acquaintances about my phobia, so that there was no reason to feel sorry for me or make fun of me, because many people find it very funny. I was just an ordinary teenager to them. One day, a friend of mine offered to throw a small party and for me to stay the night. As soon as I stepped into her living room, I became numb at once because a large mechanical clock with a pendulum hanging on the wall. My friend noticed my strange look and asked what was wrong. I had to lie and say I was simply fascinated by its beauty. Thanks to the loud music and a jolly crowd, I easily coped with a panic, and by the end of the party, I was sure that I had finally gotten rid of my phobia forever. But when we went to bed, I heard the terrible sound in the absolute silence. Every tick of the clock turned me into a little frightened girl in the bank again, and the image of a bomb that could explode at any moment appeared in front of me. I don't remember the moment the fear took me over, and I started screaming and running around the room. Eventually, I crept under the bed and buried my head in my hands. My whole body was shivering, and my heart was about to jump out of my chest. My friend was really shocked and called an ambulance at once. Unfortunately, after this incident, she stopped being friends with me because she was afraid even to approach me since my behavior really scared her. But this wasn't even the worst thing. While I was under treatment, the rumor about my new breakdown was very quickly spread throughout the school, and after that, my life changed dramatically. When I returned to school, most of my classmates avoided communicating with me. Even my new friends didn't talk to me. It really hurt because I had tried to make new friends with the girls for so long. But in the end, my phobia ruined everything again. Some people avoided me and just hid my existence. Others, as expected, began to make fun of me. Every day was real torture because it was unbearably painful to hear all those nasty things about me. Sometimes I even skipped lessons so that they wouldn't humiliate me again. However, I found a way that helped suppress the stress a little. It was a preparation for the upcoming intellectual competition, which would be held in another school. It used to be our main rival. One had to have a lot of knowledge to participate in it. A month later, I was 100% ready for it. But I was still worried because we would compete on the site of the competitors for the first time, and I knew nothing about it. Would there be a ticking clock? In this case, I would never wipe out disgrace for sure. Our team is prepared for the battle of wits in the assembly hall. After the first question was read out loud, the countdown began. My heart sank when I heard the ticking of the clock. The sound was so loud that fear started invading me. I skipped the answers to several questions, and then I said that I felt bad and quickly left the hall because it was more and more difficult to suppress my panic. I remember the subsequent events in bits and pieces, but they told me what my panic attack caused. I ran to the bathroom, locked up in there, and called the rescue service saying that there was a bomb on school grounds and it was about to explode. I was so scared that they believed me right away. In a few minutes, the police, EOD specialist, an ambulance, and a fire team were sent to the school. The school was immediately cordoned off, and they began to take everyone out carefully and quickly. The event held at the school was very large and significant, so there were a lot of people inside. As soon as the children heard about the bomb, panic began because everyone was trying to leave the building as soon as possible. The police struggled to control the panicking crowd. An EOD specialist tried to find the bomb, which of course wasn't there. I was hiding in the bathroom, listening to the ticking of the clock in my head. It was a lot of time to find me. I couldn't calm down even when help arrived. I kept saying stuff about the bomb and persuading them that it was about to explode. The policeman who was leading me to the exit realized that I was delusional. They constantly asked me about the bomb in order to find out where it was and whether it was true or not, but I could not answer since I was out of my mind due to the panic attack. I couldn't stand such pressure and I fainted. I was supposed to go to trial and be punished severely for the false alarm and panic on such a scale, but but I ended up in the hospital instead. When I came around, my mother was sitting next to me crying, and my father was comforting her. There was a doctor standing next to me who told me that it would take a long time in the hospital to recover from the stress and try to get rid of the fear and panic attacks. They had already tried to relieve me of my phobia before with the help of continuous consultations in the psychologist's office, but now I had to undergo serious treatment. I was under constant supervision of doctors and took various meds for several long months. The worst thing was the clock test, which had to be done occasionally to find out my reaction. The clock was put in front of me for a short period of time, and they watched the manifestation of panic. Fortunately, by the end of the treatment, the test delivered a positive result. The sound of the ticking clock still made me extremely uncomfortable, but the panic attacks were no longer observed, and I was extremely happy about that. The doctor also advised me to go to another school in order to avoid stress, but I didn't follow his advice. I didn't want to go to another school to start all over again. Moreover, I hoped that many people had already forgotten about the bomb incident, but my hopes were in vain. They called me crazy every single day, even though my mom started having problems with the school board. The parents of some of the children thought that I was dangerous to public safety and I should go to a special school. Mom tried to protect me, but I realized that there was nothing to be done about it. I was labeled crazy, and no one could change that. Besides, due to stress and long-term treatment, I failed the annual control test. It really upset me because I used to do so well in school. Now I couldn't even get the minimum. This meant that I had to take a grade over, which was a real shock to me. But I didn't want to go to the old school anymore because they wouldn't leave me alone there for sure. I dropped out of school and asked my parents to transfer me to homeschooling in order not to trigger panic attacks once again and to not suffer from bullying. Of course they agreed. That's why the next school year will be the beginning of my new life. Following the advice of the doctor, my parents decided that it would be better for me to avoid the school and house to secure me against terrible memories. Hello, I'm Mara Bell, and this is also me. I'm neither Copperfield's daughter nor his student. I just know how to teleport like this, and even over long distances. To be honest, the ability to move in space using teleportation is not my invention. I learned it a few years ago, and it used to be an exciting game for me, but now I realize that I have a true gem in my hands. It all started when I was a little kid. My grandfather was constantly repairing, assembling, and disassembling something in his garage, and I often hung out with him there. But all the small screws, nuts, and microcircuits were extremely boring to me, so I came up with various antics. Every now and then, I hid my grandfather's screwdrivers, left a soldering iron on, and scattered nails on the floor. And in order to moderate my temper, my grandfather made various cool toys for me, like a flying saucer which actually flew along a given trajectory, and some kind of robots which performed tasks they were performed to do. That is what I wanted. It was interesting. Besides, my grandpa often said that he would soon present one of his inventions to the world and that it would be a real breakthrough. It took me a lot of time to understand what he meant, but when I was 8, my grandfather explained to me what he meant. That day, it was raining heavily, so my grandfather and I didn't dare to ride his bike to get home. This idea seemed to be very risky. I was constantly whining because I was so hungry, and at some point, my grandfather asked if I wanted to be at home right now. I did, but what was the difference if it's impossible anyway? We had to stay there for a while because of the damn rain. But my grandpa said that I was too young to stop believing in miracles. He asked me to put on a device in my pocket. It looked like an iron remote control. He told me to press the button on it. After I did that, everything around went dark, and it seemed to me that I was going to faint, which made me a little scared. Then I saw a picture again, but it was no longer the garage. It was my house. And while I was still shocked and tried to understand what had happened, my grandfather appeared next to me in the same magical way. So from then on, I started fooling around with the teleport, putting the remote control in my pocket and presetting the route for movement. My grandpa asked me not to tell anyone about it, so the teleport became our secret. And another important rule was that I wasn't allowed to reveal my superpower to anyone. I Before appearing anywhere, I had to be sure that there was no one there. And this was my problem because I either used the teleporter right at school or bragged about it to my friends. But fortunately, none of the adults believed the kids when they said they saw Maribel teleport. It was a lot of fun. Once, I decided to play a trick on my friend Linda, who lived on the floor above me and was extremely afraid of ghosts. Late at night, I used the teleporter, went straight into her room, and then called her quietly. The poor girl opened her eyes and turned pale. She began to scream and throw things at me, everything that was on her bedside table. The lamp hit me right in the forehead, and fortunately, I managed to get away from there and back home before her parents appeared in the room. That wasn't funny at all. After I failed the prank, I had a huge bump on my forehead like a rhino horn, and I had no idea that it could endanger my reputation. The next day, I ran into Linda at the entrance of our apartment building. She started screaming at the top of her lungs and beating me with her school bag when she saw me. That's not what friends usually do. Fighting at every chance, I still wasn't over her lamp hitting my forehead, and she attacked me again. Then I decided that the best defense was to escape and quickly ran away from my friend trying to fight with me. And an hour later, we decided to talk, and she told me about what she had seen the night before and how she had thrown the lamp at a ghost's forehead. Linda was sure that it was just her imagination, but when she saw me with a bump in the place where the lamp hit the ghost, she was in chains of horror and decided to finish off the otherworldly creature. Long story short, after that incident, Linda and I stopped hanging out very much because she looked at me apprehensively all the time, and I was afraid of her. Nobody knows what's on her mind, and if she decides to attack me again. And at some point, my grandfather became very introspective and suspicious. He even asked me to stop using the teleporter at all and try to forget about it for a while. I saw that my grandpa was scared, and this situation really worried me. And a month later, something happened. It completely threw me off my stride. My grandpa was found dead in his garage. It happened quite unexpectedly out of the blue. Indeed, he was an elderly person, but dang, it's always hard to lose loved ones, especially such awesome people as my grandfather, who will make robots and all sorts of flying things. But it's not about those things. I wish my grandpa was alive. Our whole family was very upset about the loss, and at some point, I decided that I could use the teleporter again. Anyway, my grandfather was no longer around, and it was unlikely that I would ever find out what happened to him. The teleporter was his invention, and it even reminded me of him. I started right away during recess between lessons. I ran away somewhere outdoors to the bank of the river. I teleported to the cinemas and even to cool pool parties. I didn't have to ask my parents for permission to go anywhere. I just grabbed the remote and was at my destination in a second. It was like a dream come true. At some point, I really missed my grandfather. Sadness and melancholy overwhelmed me, and I really wanted to get to where everything reminded me of him, to his crush. But getting there was almost impossible because my parents put it up for sale as well as all of the stuff inside. That's why I decided to teleport there in order to recall everything again, recollect my grandfather's inventions, and feel a little nostalgic about the past, about something that was gone forever. I set the direction for the teleporter and was in the garage in a couple of seconds. To my surprise, there was a man, but he didn't notice me because he was talking to someone on a headset and was looking for something in the closet. I was about to call him and ask him where he bought the garage, but then I heard him say, "Damn, old man, where could I have put the remote control? We should have found out all this information before killing him." I grabbed the remote control right away and teleported back home, and there I began to think about what had happened. Although it was quite obvious, it was clear. My grandfather had been killed, and it was obvious why. Why hadn't anyone arrested these people? It seemed that no one even knew that it was a murder. On the same day, I told my parents about everything from the very beginning, and I even showed them how the teleporter worked. The information they received literally blew their minds. But then they found the strength and went to the police together. Soon we managed to get a check on the death of my grandfather, and we learned that he was actually killed because of his ingenious invention of the teleporter. Some people wanted to get it and present it as their invention to receive the money and awards, but the death of my grandpa was of no use because I had the remote control. I can't even imagine what would have happened to me if they knew about me. Hey guys, my name is Kristen, and I have a very unusual phobia that might seem really stupid and strange to many people. The thing is that I am really afraid of pigeons. These harmless birds make me very nervous, and I get really tense in their presence. My fear has appeared not without reason. When I was 6 years old, my parents and I went to Venice, which they always had dreamed of visiting. There were a lot of pigeons in one of the squares, and I was shocked by seeing so many birds in one place. After noticing how people were hand-feeding them, I also wanted to feed the birds. Mom bought me some green and put it into my hand. In an instant, pigeons surrounded me on all sides. At first, it was fun, but then real chaos began, and I was left all alone in the center of it. Pigeons suddenly began fighting for food. That's why a huge feathered cloud was flying around me. The birds were pecking, scratching, and even pooping on my clothes. I wanted to scream, but I could not do it because the pigeons were fighting next to my face. When the angry pigeons dispersed, I was really hysterical. Since then, I have been terribly afraid of these birds. But I decided not to tell anyone about my phobia, which I've had for many years, because I realized that it really sucks. It is totally okay to be afraid of spiders, snakes, clowns, but not pigeons. That's why even my parents and close friends did not know anything. Unfortunately, this leads to dire consequences. On my 15th birthday, I decided to invite all my friends to my place. My parents and I prepared everything for the upcoming party, and I had thought it would be like one of the most memorable holidays in my life. And I really remembered it forever, as I was embarrassed in front of everyone. When my friends came to my house, they presented me with a huge cage and a white dove inside. To say that I got an unpleasant shock is an understatement. I tried to pretend that everything was fine, but everything inside of me shrank, and I was afraid. My friend Sandra hugged me and announced to everyone that my little dream had come true. At that moment, I remembered how at school we were looking at the domestic pigeon belonging to our classmate Frank. Sandra was totally delighted by this bird, and in order to be like her, I said that I also dreamed of having a similar pet. But I could not even imagine that my friends would come up with this idea of giving me a bird for my birthday. I said thanks to them and put the cage in the farthest corner of the room, but the pigeon still made me feel tense even though I couldn't see it. I knew that it was in the same room with me, and this made me worry. While everybody was having fun and congratulating me, I tried to overcome the hysteria that I had inside with a smile. Perhaps I would have succeeded if not for Sandra. While they were bringing in a large cake, she let the pigeon out of the cage and secretly put it on my shoulder. When I felt the pigeon on my shoulder, I was totally gripped by panic. Out of fear, I started screaming loudly and waving my arms, throwing the cake right at my friends. Being scared, the dove started flying all over the room, which frightened me even more. Not being able to control my emotions, I started yelling at my friends, demanding that they immediately go away and take that feathered monster with them. My guests were unpleasantly shocked by my inappropriate behavior. They tried to comfort me, but being unable to help myself, I was just being rude to them. So in the end, they left. My parents immediately ran to where the noise was heard, and they were frightened when they saw me in such a state. I couldn't come to my senses, and because of this, it was necessary to call an ambulance. The EMS, arriving a few minutes later, gave me a sedative and asked what caused my panic. I had to confess to both of them and my parents that I had a fear of pigeons. The paramedic nodded his head and said that I had a panic attack because of the aggravated phobia. He advised me to visit a psychologist to eliminate the fear of these birds once and for all. However, visiting a psychologist did not bother me at all, unlike the reaction of my friends to my weird attack. When I came to school the next day, none of them talked to me. I understood that they were upset with me because I behaved so badly towards them. A little while later, I found that the whole class did not want to talk to me. Apparently, the news about my birthday quickly spread among them. The monitor of our class, Frankie, had announced that I'd been boycotted for an indefinite period. This made me really upset, so for the rest of the day, I was walking around the school like a ghost as my friends and classmates were doing their best to pretend they did not notice me. Despite the fact that everybody ignored me, I did not tell my main secret to anyone. It would be better if everyone thought that I was an ungrateful friend than for them to find out about my phobia. At that moment, I was sure that their resentment would quickly disappear, but I was mistaken. When I left school, my friends started throwing paintballs at me. Some of them even shouted that the day before, They had felt as bad as I felt at that moment. I could not stand such embarrassment and ran away from the schoolyard. Right at the gate, I came across Sandra, who did not take part in the mess for some reason. She looked at me bitterly and turned away. When I came back home, the first thing that I noticed was a cage with a dove. Apparently, my parents had not managed to sell it yet. I was so angry that these birds ruined my life that I pushed the cage and ran to my room. However, I could not calm down because of that incident in school. Friends and classmates hated me. Sandra didn't want to talk to me either, and my stupid phobia really drove me crazy. In the end, I decided to take a little walk to calm down my emotions. I did not pay attention to the route as I had my head in the clouds. My feet brought me to a local park where there were no people at all, which was quite strange. I stopped for a second to change the song that was playing, and finally got a look at what was going on around me. I was standing by a bench surrounded by scattered breadcrumbs. Apparently someone had left them to feed the pigeons, which had already noticed me and began to gather around to eat. Being shocked, I could not even take a step. There were more and more birds around, and they were eating the breadcrumbs, climbing on my feet, and pushing into each other. Most of all, I was afraid that they would start fighting for food again and peck me to death. I wanted to call my parents, but unfortunately my phone died. Tears were rolling down my cheeks because of despair. Unpleasant chills ran down my spine because I was constantly thinking of those pigeons were going to attack me. I was trying to disperse them with my hands, but nothing helped. They flew off for some time and then came back again. I realized that if someone didn't help me at that moment, I would faint or go crazy from fear. Fortunately, I noticed a silhouette approaching me, which made me really happy. It was Sandra. I called her and asked her to help me. She didn't ignore me and came up to me. I quickly told her about my fear of pigeons, which made me behave in such a weird manner at my birthday party. Sandra just grinned and said that these were my problems and quickly left, laughing angrily at me. And again, I was left alone, surrounded by the birds that had already begun to sit on me. I could not bear such pressure and burst into tears, no longer hoping that anyone would help me. But suddenly, my psychologist, Mrs. Vincent, showed up. Seeing me with my eyes full of tears and being surrounded by pigeons, she immediately understood what had happened. Without saying a word, she drove the birds away from me and hurried to comfort me so that I would not have another panic attack. Then, Mrs. Weston said that she would not leave me alone in such a state and decided to accompany me home. On the way, she said that I should not be ashamed of my fears, since this was the second time that I found myself in a stressful situation because of this. The psychologist also added that I was supposed to have sessions with her more often in order to quickly overcome my phobia. I was incredibly grateful for her help. After that situation in the park, I began to visit the psychologist several times a week in order to quickly cope with my fear. I also followed Mrs. Weston's advice and stopped being afraid to talk about my phobia. Over time, my classmates started talking to me again, but I could not forgive my old friends for their antics. Even Sandra remained in the past because she abandoned me in my time of need. But thanks to this decision, I was able to find new friends who appreciated my phobia.